First-person shooters to me aren't typically a genre I really get into. It always feels kind of the same. Like, nothing ever feels truly exceptional to me. It takes something really special to catch my attention, like Doom in 2016 or 13 back on the GameCube. It needs to have some kind of its own identity to catch my attention. What's going on, everyone? I'm Jay, my channel Square Pegs. Welcome back to Saturday Morning Reviews. Been a while since we've done one of these. If you are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button down below. I'd love to have you around. I'm doing 2 to 3 videos a week. Today we are talking about a game just absolutely dripping in style from Axis Games called RICO London. This is on the Nintendo Switch. It's also available on other consoles, but today we're talking about the Switch version. And I want to thank Axis for providing the review code for this game. I was very much looking forward to this because when I first saw this, the cel-shaded graphics, kind of the eShop presence of it, making it look a lot like kind of their own take on Die Hard, we'll get into that, was something that really caught my attention. It was something that really made me excited. Now, if you are new to the channel, the way I do my reviews is I talk about 4 categories. I don't offer review scores. I just give you my opinion on what the title is. We talk about the look, the sound, the gameplay, and the aesthetics. Aesthetics is kind of a catch-all category. It's where things that don't really successfully fit into the other categories live, so that's where things like, if this is a boxed game, things where like the box art or the manual or things like that would live. But since it is a digital game, probably going to be a fairly short segment talking about the aesthetics of the game. But let's start off at the top. We're going to talk about the look. Now, at first blush, the game's gorgeous, right? Like, the cel-shaded graphics, it looks very nice on the Switch. And I'm going to tell you right now, playing this in handheld on the OLED is kind of a dream. It's absolutely gorgeous. Things just pop off the screen. I love the comic book presentation as you're laying out kind of the story of the game. You know, breaking it down into panels that have a little bit of movement in them is really quite pleasant. It's nice to experience, it's nice to take in, and it's nice to enjoy, you know? Like I said, when something has its own style and has its own kind of identity based on the look of the game, that's what's going to catch my attention when it comes to a first-person shooter, and that's really what caught my eye with RICO London at first when I saw it. In action, the game is gorgeous. There's beautiful effects. When you go into a room, things slow down and you get this nice bullet time effect a la The Matrix, which is really clever and really cool, and it works really well in this game. And I sincerely appreciate the effort to kind of give it its own identity in that regard. And I like the look of the enemy characters in the game, and I like the look of the environments, but the look is also part of the problem, because one of the issues I have with this game is that it's incredibly repetitive. Like, the look, if you've seen one room, you've kind of seen them all for every environment you go into. There's a very limited scope of rooms and enemies that you're going to encounter in any particular level. Like, the initial level, the opening level of the game that you're seeing most of the footage from, because as always, I do not like to spoil things in the game. I only show you footage from the first level or two just to kind of protect it if you're interested. I don't want to spoil things. The first 2 levels in the game, you're climbing up the skyscraper to take out the enemies that have taken hostages and are doing an arms deal. And everything kind of looks the same, like to the point where when you go into a corridor, there's going to be stairs going up that lead nowhere, stairs going down that lead nowhere, and just a small flight of stairs up to a door that you have to breach, and then you rinse and repeat and do it again. It's really a feeling of deja vu. Like, every time you play it, it's like, oh, it's this room again. Oh, it's these 3 enemies again. Oh, it's this again. Hey, look, it's the same box of paper on this desk that's on every other desk in this room. It's a good look, but it's a very Stepford look, if you know what I mean. Like, everything feels the same. Everything is just in its place and perfect and has to be where it is, and everything is repetitive and, like, down to the point where it feels like I'm watching Hawkeye, where all the bad guys are the tracksuit Draculas, everyone's dressed the same. So, like, if you've seen one guy with a shotgun, you've seen every guy with a shotgun. If you've seen one guy with a baseball bat, you've seen every guy with a baseball bat, because they all look the same. And, I don't know, like, it's hard for me to, like, I don't want to seem ungrateful because I think the game does look really good, but it's a repetitive use of assets that just is like, okay, come on, just a little bit of variety here would be really nice. And another thing, the texture work in the game from a distance is really good, but the closer you get up on things, you see how fragmented they are, and you see exactly how pixelated and blurry things are, and it takes away from it. Like, for something that has such style and such beautiful appearance with those cel-shaded graphics, to get in and look at the textures and see how messy they are, it kind of sucks. And I understand this is a first-person shooter, so it's not something where a lot of people are going to be stopping and slowing down and looking at the environments and, like, examining everything on the desks, but as I'm playing, it's something I do. I do that with a lot of games, and that's just something I ran into, so I wanted to let you guys know about it. Now, from a sound perspective, I actually really dig it. I think the voice acting is fantastic. Each character has their own personality, and I think that the sound effects and the music in the game are really good. Guns have a different sound depending on what you're using. A shotgun doesn't sound like a machine gun. It sounds like its own device. And one of the things, like I mentioned, the slowdown when you go into a room when you enter the bullet time, so the enemy's voices will slow down, so you will have an enemy like call out that you've breached the room, and as you're sweeping the room, you'll hear the guys kind of talking in slow motion, and then when you snap out of slow motion, they go back to a normal voice. And it's kind of silly and kind of stupid, but this is, I'm eternally a 12-year-old, so it makes me chuckle when I hear it. But we run into the same problem we had with the visuals here with the sound in repetition. So the bosses on each level, the big characters on each level are going to have their own unique identity and their own unique voice. Your character has its own voice, the chief has its own voice, your partner has his own voice, but the enemies all sound the same. So you're going to hear like the same 5 bits of dialogue over and over and over and over and over again as you play, and yeah, it gets pretty old pretty fast, and it's frustrating because there's such a good foundation here of what could be done that it just really feels like this was something that was missed. Like, the enemy voices are there and they all work and they sound good and they have a great series of dialogue, but when you hear the same 4 lines of dialogue over and over and over again, you just want to turn it off, and that's frustrating. Now, from a gameplay perspective, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about. Now, a handheld experience, while it looks great, it doesn't control terribly great with the Joy-Cons, and that's not anything with the game. It's a first-person shooter with Joy-Cons. It's not an ideal situation. You want to play this with a Pro Controller or a real controller in your hands, and the experience playing the game with a Pro Controller is solid. It is a competent first-person shooter. Aiming is great. You are able to pick up and drop weapons. You're able to, that's the thing I think I like the most about the gameplay in the game, is you're able to go through and as you defeat enemies, pick up their weapons, and their arsenal will become yours. So you start off the game with a machine gun and a pistol, and as you go, you're able to replace them as you want. Like, the shotguns in the second level are spectacular. The further into the game you go, the more heavier weapons you get as the game gets a little bit hairier and a little bit more difficult. So you're going to want to pick things up, not just stick with your standard machine gun and pistol, because you need better stuff. And I know that's kind of like standard FPS fare, but it works really well here, and it actually fits thematically with what's going on because it's such a huge arms deal. You're going to use those weapons to your advantage, and you're on your own. Like, you're even presented as, you're getting no backup on this. No backup at all. And that's kind of lends itself perfectly to your character's personality and to the layout of the game. It feels right, and it feels like that's what you want to do because, again, this is a love letter to Die Hard. This is something where you're going to want to have that experience in hand, like down to the fact that there's even Christmas stuff everywhere, which I think is great. But you're going to want to be able to go through, and it's you against the world, and that's exactly how the game feels. But, and I keep saying this for like every section of the game, and it's the repetition once again. Like, when you go through, you are going to experience the same things over and over and over again. The same rooms, the same layouts, the same enemies, the same conflict. Like, it's a very frustrating experience because and I don't just mean from like a memorization standpoint. Like, this isn't like playing a classic Wolfenstein game where it's like, I've memorized the map, I know exactly what I need to do. No, it's a case of you'll go into a room, you will have a standard layout, you'll sweep the room and defeat the enemies, you'll go into the next room, and it'll be a passageway to another room, or it'll be another room to fight in. And then you'll go through that. And then a few rooms later, you will cycle back to that first room you were in. And it's like, oh, it's just so close to being great, and it's so close to being just a truly fantastic game, but it doesn't quite get there because of all the repetition and all of the kind of shortcuts it takes to make the game work. And I think that's really where the frustration comes in, because this game is so close to being great, it just doesn't quite get there. Now, gameplay itself is solid. There are some issues I've encountered. There's definitely some slowdown. Like, it's weird because it kind of goes into the situation I was just talking about, the rooms repeating. There are, I like to call them transition rooms, where you'll walk in and it'll just be a corridor, specifically in the first level, stairs going up, stairs going down, and you go up a short flight of stairs to go into the next room. And as you go in there, like every single time on my Switch, the music would start to stutter, things would slow down, frame rates would drop. Look out! And then it would pick back up after like 3 seconds, and it was like, oh, I must be going into a new area. There's going to be new rooms to go through. And sure as hell, that's what happened. And I realize this is kind of nitpicky, but when you're shelling out $50 for a game, man, And I realize this is kind of asking a lot because I shelled out the money for Hyrule Warriors and Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, and there's a ton of slowdown in that one too. But when I spend the money on something, and I spend that much money on something, I want it to work. You know, like I don't want to run into the same thing over and over again, and I don't want to run into slowdown and just, I don't know, it feels like a missed opportunity. Now, aesthetically, the game is pleasing, like I said. It's laid out like a comic book. Pause menus have panels on them that say start and things like that. So, and I like that. I really appreciate that. And there's a lot of stuff that's not like directly tied into the gameplay. Like I mentioned in sound that I really like the voice acting in the game, and I think that the lead protagonist does such an incredible job in the role of your main character that she's just fantastic.
So, with respect, I don't think the terrorist fraternity are going to take a night off just because we're ushering in a new millennium.
Be that as it may, the Commissioner disagrees. This is settled, Redfern.
And the guy who plays the chief, who plays Governor, is just so droll and so dry, and he's wonderful. And it lends so much to the overall kind of you against the world narrative of the game that I really appreciate that, and it adds so much just life to a game. Now, final thoughts. What do I think about RICO London? Now, the biggest issue I have with RICO London is the price tag. It is a $50 game, and at $50, I have a certain set of expectations that I kind of anticipate a game to be at, and I don't think RICO London gets there. Now, if this was a $25 game, I'd be significantly more forgiving of its shortcomings, but at $50, that's a AAA price. You know, that is something where I expect a game to work as flawlessly as humanly possible and to not be repetitive to the point where it feels the same over and over and over again. And unfortunately, that's where I'm at with RICO London. Now, if you're a huge first-person shooter fan, if you like things like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels or Snatch, you love Die Hard, you want to play something that reminds you of 13 back on the GameCube days, this is probably the game for you, but understand going in that it is going to be something where you are going to be experiencing the same things over and over and over again, and it's not going to give you anything truly unique or truly substantial where you feel like you're going to be playing something big. It's a good game, don't get me wrong. I truly enjoy RICO London. I think it's a very smart game, and there is a solid foundation here that I hope leads to sequels, because I think there is something to be said for this world that they've constructed, for the characters that they've built, and for the idea of what the game could be, that I really hope they get another shot at it. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of the review. If you've played RICO London, if I'm completely off base, let me know. This is just my opinion as someone who isn't necessarily a huge first-person shooter fan, but wanted to try something out that has a bunch of style. Unfortunately, it fails on substance. Please hit like, please subscribe if you're new around here, and hey, if you really dig the work I do, consider becoming a monthly Patreon sponsor like the folks you're seeing on screen right now. Patrons get ad-free early access to videos for a donation of as little as $1 a month, and if you really enjoy the show and you want to help the channel out more directly, consider picking up some of my merchandise at squarepegsyt.com, where we've got shirts, hats, masks for men, women, and children. Till next time, folks, I've been Jay. Appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me today as we take a look at RICO London on the Nintendo Switch. Hey, take a look at the videos on screen right now if you want to check out more of my reviews, and remember, until next time, play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.